Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us in the next episode of In the Nick of Time. This is going to be a fun episode today with Joey, a great friend and colleague over the years, getting things done in the Department of Defense, both at AFWorks and Platform One, and now at the Outpost. So we're going to be talking about how can small businesses and companies do business with the Department of Defense, and how to get started, how to get accredited, how to get where you want to be in terms of sales and marketing, and of course also accreditation of your software as well. So stay tuned. This is going to be a very fun episode. If you have questions, it's going to be the time to ask. Wanted to remind everybody a couple of things today. First, of course, if you have not yet subscribed to the show, do that at the nickoftime.tv so we can send you the mailings every week to let you know about the next guests coming every week. You'll see that, again, next week we're going to have a great, amazing guest from the Linux Foundation to talk about embedded systems and how she literally implemented the real-time OS support on Linux. So that's going to be fun. We'll announce it at the end of this episode. Now, also wanted to remind also people that we are launching Learn with Nick. We have a few seats left when it comes to the early adopters for the launch by the end of this month. We have about 45 video segments on digital transformation and DevSecOps, Kubernetes, Service Mesh, and all the good stuff that you need to learn if you want to be able to move at a pace of relevance and compete in this world. So we're launching the platform in September, and we're going to release new video segments every other week and have live Q&A sessions with the members every other week as well for 2 hours. So it's going to be a great community of practice for people that want to learn about DevSecOps and digital transformation. So make sure you check it out. If you're interested to become a member, you can shoot an email at info@preventbridge.com. Finally, Platform One is launching their basic ordering agreement, BOA on ramp. So it gives you an opportunity as a company to join the contract vehicle, which is really the largest vehicle in DoD for DevSecOps. So if you have interest to bid on this and become one of the BOA holder, you want to click on this link I'm putting here on the chat again. So click on that link on the sam.gov so you can bid for this new on-ramp and become one of the companies providing support and services to the DoD for DevSecOps engagements. So if you have products or if you do services and consulting, that's definitely a contract you want to be able to be part of. So check it out. It's pretty rare that the on-ramps are done now. So you wanna check it out before it is too late. And of course, our friend JD has done a great job at Platform One by creating this new on-ramp and making sure that the right companies can be picked to get the job done and have a breadth of diversity and of course different sizes and teams with different skills to bring value to the warfighter. So check that out. Now, wanted to, of course, introduce our guest. If you don't know him, is amazing. I'm going to remove this comment so you can see his bio here. Before I bring him on the screen, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of his background. Joey Arora is today the VP of Growth at the Outpost. He's been leading the conversation when it comes to businesses that want to learn how to work with the government. And the Outpost helped over 250 companies win about 300 million of contracts, which is pretty amazing. Before that, of course, he was with us at Platform One as the Chief Skilling Officer. He was working to streamline and scale the operations of the government program that is Platform One, designed to get commercial software authorized for DoD, of course. And what he's been building is also helping organizations to be able to use Platform One at scale, also with a reseller program as well. He is, of course, an Air Force veteran. He is today a reservist, and he has served, of course, for many years, first as an airfield operation officer in the U.S. and in Afghanistan. during the second half of his career, he has led innovation effort, and that's where I got to meet him, where he co-founded AFWorks. Of course, everybody knows AFWorks, but for people that don't know AFWorks, the point of AFWorks is to connect startups and companies, innovators, to the department, so we can use best of breed and get access to the best innovation on the planet. And of course, he scaled that from 5 people to 350 people, and got engagements with 100,000 airmen, funded 2,400 companies with 723 million. That led to 530 prototypes, and 21 of these projects scaled to serve very strategic needs for the Air Force. So it's not just MVPs or half-baked prototypes. It's really now full-scale capabilities. He has, before that, started 3 companies, and facilitates the startup weekends. He's been a Million Cups organizer, and he's passionate about innovation, of course, as you can tell. He enjoys Legos. If you don't know, that makes sense, right? For Kubernetes and Legos, you wanna build innovation there, and working out, unlike me. So he's a better shape than me for sure, and getting outside and making stories. So let's bring Joey here with us. Good to have you, Joey.
Hey, good afternoon and good morning wherever you're at in the world. Thanks, Nick, for having me. Really excited to be here.
It was so good to have you, and we always start with the same concept. So we're gonna give you a shot at. I did a very poor job at giving your journey, but you're gonna do a better job than me. So.
No, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's an honor to be a part of this community of people who are driving forward the innovation space. A little bit about me. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and it's been an amazing opportunity to be involved in a community with amazing mountains. I grew up in an Indian household and went to school at CU Boulder, did ROTC there. That's how I ended up getting my commission and going into the Air Force. A key part of that was also the President's Leadership class at CU. It was through those connections that I made in college that actually ended up getting me connected to the team that started AFWorks. Steve and crew, I met Steve back in 2010, and we were friends, then reconnected back in 2016. So a little bit about my journey. I spent the first 5 years of my Air Force career doing airfield operations. So I was in charge of air traffic control, radar tower on an airfield. And I've always had a passion for, hey, how do we do things a little bit better? How do you bring in the entrepreneurial spirit? How do you bring in the right technology? And from day one that I was in the Air Force, I was like, man, I can do more on my phone than I can on my Air Force computer. And unfortunately, that's still true today, but it's still being worked. We're getting a lot closer to the right technologies being in the right places, and our computers being fixed. So through that passion and that drive to hey, how can we make the Air Force a better place? I got the opportunity to be connected to people like Dave Hardin, Steve Lauver, Chris Benson, Austin, and that community of folks that are driving forward. Hey, they wanted to solve problems. And we got the amazing opportunity to build AFWorks from the ground up and really shape the way that the DoD has been looking at how do you work with small businesses, and more specifically, how do you work with startups, high growth companies, and how do they partner with the DoD to scale out their technology and apply it to warfighter problem sets. So that's been what I've been passionate about for the last few years. I left AFWorks in 2020, went to Platform One. I love my time there. It was a great opportunity to learn and really work through, hey, Platform One got started. How do we actually deploy these services at scale? And working through the business challenges behind that was a key part of what I did. And the team is phenomenal at Platform One. Really excited that the BOA is open, getting more opportunities for great businesses to be a part of that ecosystem. And since then, I left to join the Outpost. Dave and I worked together at AFWorks. I founded AFWorks, founded the Outpost, and got a chance to work with him. And here's the VP of Growth. We're passionate about helping companies win inside of government. And so our tagline is do good, make money. And our whole focus is how do we help companies scale out in the Department of Defense and in government contracts. So we've helped over 250 companies win over $300 million. over the last 3 years. And sort of a thread through all of this in my journey is that I've been really passionate about how do you scale great companies? How do you get startups involved with the DoD? And it's really been a unique opportunity in all of the work that I've been doing to bring together national security, technology, and capital. And being at the intersection of all of that has been a phenomenal life journey for me. And I'm excited to see where this goes. So, and yes, Cody, I'm clean shaven today. So,
well, you're on duty, right? So that's what happens. So, all right. So obviously, it's a pretty amazing journey. You're pretty young, like me, right? I don't know how old you are, but maybe you're younger, or I don't know. I don't even know. How old are you?
30s, 31.
31. So you're even younger than me. I thought I was young, but you beat me there. And you've done a lot.
You've done a lot
right?
of good
and
stuff.
Now, funny, with the Outpost, that's this very interesting model. I was pretty intrigued about it, and I've seen you get stuff done, which is pretty unique, right? Because a lot of people talk about stuff all day, but they don't get anything done. So that's always more exciting when we see actual tangible results. You talked about the amount of money and number of companies you've helped, but when I look back, right, why do we need this dual use technology to beat China? What's the reasoning behind all this stuff?
Yeah, if you take a look at this is a large question that we're asking here, but it really comes down to sort of the fundamental need of there's two systems that are at play really in the world scale, and that China's viewpoint on the world is that you can have an authoritarian, centrally controlled government that also has outreach and is integrated into the business sector as an extension of government, and controlling the population, controlling what they're thinking, controlling what they have access to is the best way to create a prosperous society. The West in America, the United States, has an opinion on how we build a democracy. And it's saying, hey, we want the freedom of choice, the freedom of press, the freedom of people to choose what they want to be involved in. And enterprise and government are distinctly separate. And it allows for innovation to happen, for growth to happen, and for people to express their own opinions that might be counter to the state's opinion. And what we're seeing in the world is that there is, the GDPs are growing in China and in other countries. And the US has held a dominant position over the last 70 plus years. After World War II, the United States was able to come out on top, and through the technological revolution has been able to hold a dominant place in the world markets. Just by sheer numbers, those things are changing. China's GDP is expected to pass the United States. The United States has, less than about a third of the people that China does. And so in order for us to say, hey, how does the democratic system actually exist in a future world where we're outnumbered? We have to really double down on the partnerships, the public-private partnerships that exist between government driving technology forward and the commercial world driving technology forward. Since 1960, the government has the share of the government portion of research and development to today has flipped. In 1960, it was about 70 to 80% of research and development was funded by government. That equation has changed now that commercial technology and commercial R&D is about 70 to 80%. So we're talking $500 billion of commercial R&D to the $100 billion of government-funded R&D that's happening in the United States. And that trend is not only in the United States, but it's across the developed world, where you're seeing a lot of the development of new technologies being led by commercial industry. If we want to make sure that we're at the cutting edge of the next fight, we need to make sure that whether it's in quantum, biotechnology, hypersonics, cyber, we need to be able to harness the newest capabilities that a startup is developing, that a major business is developing, and integrate that into a way that our government operates. Because if we take a look at our competitors like China, they see industry as an extension of government. So the R&D that's happening in those commercial companies like Tencent, like the owners of TikTok, they're capturing the data from those algorithms and are able to leverage that into their the way they govern. And we don't have that opportunity here in the United States, and I'd say for good reason, right? That allows for the flexibility and freedom. But we need to still be able to integrate the latest and greatest technologies if we want to be toe-to-toe with China, because it's going to come down to who has the best AI and who can make that best split-second decision in the next fight. And so it's not only going to be about why do you need the best tech, I'd say, Nick, it's about going a step further and digging into, okay, well, how do you integrate that into the warfighting capability? We're going to talk a little bit more about that as well, about how do you get startups into the DoD space.
Yeah, and most people don't really realize that the U.S. government does not have access really to most of the top innovations that we see coming from the commercial side in the U.S. So you see, of course, U.S. companies leading most of the markets you mentioned when it comes to cyber and AI and hypersonics and such. Although China is also starting to compete pretty strongly in these markets. So it's not always true anymore. But the fact is, U.S. companies are doing pretty good, and it's not alarming, right? That you would wake up and be like, well, we need to step up the game when it comes to the commercial side of the house. But what people don't realize is the government mostly does not have access to those companies, because either those companies are seeing the government as too slow and too cumbersome to do business with, or even I see a lot of companies, unfortunately, particularly maybe from California, not willing to engage with the government, particularly the DoD, when it comes to warfighter and weapons, and they have this fear of being tied to the weapon side of the house, and of course, like you said, China has kind of the luxury, although we all agree that freedom is better, but the fact is they have the luxury of forcing their companies to do business with them. And that gives them access to their best of breed. And so even if their best of breed is not as good as ours, the fact is they have better capabilities on the fighting side, thanks to that little advantage there. That's not going to stick forever, but the fact is right now it's what's happening. And so that's why I think, making sure that we have access to best of breed, particularly now that you see that the top innovations are not coming from the government side anymore, but more coming from the commercial side, which used to be different too, right? Usually, if you look at some of the top innovations, either it came from NASA or it came from DoD. When it came to some of the most, the most exciting innovations we've seen in the last, 40, 50 years before maybe the 2000s, it was often coming from the government side. But now you see, like you said, more investments being made, but also better return on investment and better capabilities because of less waste and better ability to innovate on the commercial side, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, a great example of that is that the mRNA vaccines that were created were actually foundational. The tech to lay out the research for that was led by DARPA. But you're seeing that commercial technologies were the ones that were able to take that and commercialize that technology to respond to an urgent need we had in our world. And you're 100% right that the technologies that are being developed nowadays are by the startups. NASA is the one pushing out the requirements. They have some amazing technologies that have come from there, but you're still seeing that, hey, SpaceX has pushed the boundaries a lot further than anybody else has, because there's a desire to, in the commercial world, the margins are there now. The industry exists.
Yeah, if you look at some of the numbers of SpaceX versus NASA programs, it's pretty mind-boggling. I don't have the numbers on me to give you the exact numbers, but in terms of the waste and the time to deliver and the overspending, which is about in the 50% range on the NASA side versus like the 0.7% on the SpaceX side, and if you look at the fact that NASA was making fun of SpaceX when they were talking about reusing rockets back in the day, and now, without SpaceX, we'll still be using Russia to send people to the ISS. That would be pretty problematic right now when you see that Russia is announcing they're gonna get out of the ISS, and now we would have nobody else to send our people to the station. It's pretty scary that we let both I guess Russia in that use case, but also of course China. If you look at penicillin and most of the ability to produce it if not all of it, is down now in China. It's kind of mind-boggling we let that kind of stuff happen. And so making sure that we have the ability to bring stuff back into the US with the supply chain, and what we've seen both with COVID and also with potential, military issues there. You definitely don't want to have a dependency on, critical technology or medicine or power, right? That you've seen also in Europe, with Europe and Germany, particularly compared to France, for example. But you see Germany being so dependent on Russia, right? So that's probably not a good idea. So anyway, we got this dual use, right? So we get the point. We get why it's important for the government, right, to get access to it. But why does it matter for the companies, right? Because companies always have two objections, right? One is, if I focus on the government, it's going to cost me a lot of money, take a lot of time, it's going to be painful, right? It's going to move slow. It's not always true, but it is often true, right? And then they're like, well, why don't I focus instead on telecommunications or banking or healthcare, right? Why am I going to go and deal with DoD and classification and all this, nonsense?
Yeah. And the reputation that you're mentioning, right, that government is difficult to work with, is one that the government has earned through the work that's been done over the last 15 to 20 plus years. But
Yeah.
I'd argue that's changing. There's a movement inside of government to do things faster, to do things better, and work with commercial industry, right? You're seeing some of those people that are part of this community that are pushing the pathways forward, right? You mentioned the Platform One basic ordering agreement at the start of this call. And that is a great example of government saying, hey, we're going to push out an opportunity for contract that's going to be quick. We're going to respond quickly, be able to engage with the offerers, and put companies on contract to deliver capability faster than they ever could before. And so as a company is thinking about, why should you consider the Department of Defense? Well, if you're looking at that versus the commercial industry, the honest truth is, yes, it will take a little bit more time. It might take a little bit more time to get paid. But the difference in the opportunity is just like as if you're engaging with finance or healthcare. These are big, complex industries that once you get a foot in the door and you start solving real problems, adding value, that the space to grow, the opportunity to grow and deliver value, to solve meaningful problems, that opportunity is large within the government. And there's contract values associated with that are in the multi-millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to deliver those capabilities. So there's a great business case to say, hey, we want to get our foot into the door. We want to try leveraging R&D contracts or leverage a commercial solutions opening, go prototype a capability with a DoD customer, understand what they truly need, and build on that, and to get to a program of record, as it's called in the DoD. And so, taking a step back there, you're like, well, I don't know what any of those words mean, or I don't know what a program record is. I don't know where to start engaging with government. Well, often that a lot of dual use companies, this is a chance to learn. As if you were going into the finance sector or you're going into the healthcare sector, every sector is going to have a little bit of nuance in who you interact with, how to talk to them, how to close that deal. But the advantage that the government has is that the government budget is unlikely to go down, right? That even in the uncertain economic times that we have, government funding is going to stay relatively stable. You're going to have an opportunity to work on problem sets that you can add a lot of value to, as government technology and capabilities tend to be a little bit further behind. Or in certain cases, you're driving the future of R&D and driving the new standard when you're working with government. And so you're getting to work on tough problem sets that will pay competitively, and you'll be able to lock in a multi-year contract for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and there's a couple of more things, right? The first one that I see a lot in the companies I sit on the board of is they use the government, particularly the DoD, as a reference, not just with customers, and it works pretty well with telcos and retailers, and particularly banking, where you have air-gapped use cases, right? So when you go and tell them you're running on the high side on the DoD, I think people pay attention, right? And that's one that's pretty good. But also with investors as well, I see it too. Despite some people pretending that it's not always the case. I've yet to see that. So I think people care. Of course, if you only have DoD customers and you have no commercial customers, I think investors and VCs will be pretty scared, and they should be. That's why I think dual use on both sides is so important. But at the very least, I see a big point there. The other point that I think is the most important for me, coming from the commercial side for 22 years before going into DoD, and I had touched every market there is on the planet, between retail, banking, healthcare, you name it. So I've done a little bit of everything with the largest company in the world. And yet, I can tell you, after leaving the government, particularly the DoD, I could not find something as meaningful and impactful to my life. But also, now that I have kids, you look at that and you're like, well, if you want your kids to have a fighting chance at winning against China in 20 years, that's probably the most important thing you could do. So I would argue, if people knew how bad the situation is with China and how much, both lack of innovation, incompetence, waste, whatever you want to call it, is happening in the government, and you see that, you feel like, like you said, we're spending $800 billion a year in DoD, so we feel pretty good about it, right? We feel like we're doing a good job, but they don't know that most of it is wasted. So of course, that doesn't help. But the fact is, coming in and helping improving that and bringing real capabilities to the warfighter is such a massive enabler. And so I think for the impact you're bringing to the table for your kids and grandkids, they just probably nothing like it. So even now, after leaving about a year now, I can't find anything as exciting or as meaningful after leaving the department. So that's another thing. All right, so we talked about the dual use. Now, you have this vision like me, right, that we need to also expand the defense industrial base to a lot of both small and large organizations to bring best of breed. But how do you end up creating the next generation of billion-dollar competitors to the current primes?
Yeah, so that's a billion-dollar question, I would say. And the biggest pathways that the Air Force has led the way in creating this, and we help foster a lot of this in building AFWorks, is we wanted to take thousands of small bets, and we leveraged the SBIR program to do so, where we said, hey, they're now doing $75,000 contracts for 3 months, and they're doing about 1,000 of those a year. And then you take the second stage, where you're doing about 300 to 500 contracts that are about $2.25 million, where you're prototyping with those companies and actually having them engage with the government stakeholder, partner with them, with the actual end user of the technology and the customer who's going to buy it, go prototype those technologies. And now you have about 500 experiments that are running each year, where you're saying, hey, is this technology actually going to solve the problems we need? And then you're going to take a few large bets. And this is where the government is saying, hey, we've found these technologies, they're super useful. And when we're prototyping with them, they've delivered results. And we want to build upon that. And so AFWorks built up the TACFI and STRATFI programs. The idea behind when we created those was we wanted to make large bets that were happening with those government customers and or with commercial venture capital or other commercial investments into those companies. Because if you want to create billion-dollar competitors to the primes, you need to help these businesses get in touch with those government stakeholders. We need to truly understand what the end users need and where the actual customers are for that capability. Because often the customer is separated from and very distinct in an organizational capacity and responsibility than the DoD end users. And so to create billion-dollar competitors to the primes, I would say that what's happening across the DoD now is where we need to continue doubling down, where you have organizations like Army Futures Command, Platform One, that are leveraging broad area announcements, commercial solutions openings, and these capabilities where they're saying, hey, we want to prototype something. And you're able to accelerate the requirements process that the government has in place. And you're able to prove capability for a warfighter need within a 6 to 12 month period, get paid well to do that, and then to grow and scale those contract opportunities. So once those companies find a niche area to focus on, let's say whether it's machine learning so they can do image recognition, be the best company in that space, and then can you continue expanding that portfolio in other ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capabilities. And we're seeing some of that, right? SpaceX, Anduril are exceptions to that rule right now because they had billion-dollar, well-established founders before they went into those business lines. But you're seeing there are a lot of smaller companies that have run through the AFWERX process, the Strat 5 process, that have great valuations. They're delivering technology and capability to the end user, and they're scaling they're in programs of record today. They're delivering over those next 4 years. So to answer your question really succinctly there, Nick, it's about changing the culture and the incentives around how do we engage with small businesses and really opening up that conversation with the customers and end users.
Yeah, I think one of the most frustrating thing I hear from the small businesses, even after getting a SBIR, phase 1 or 2, is the lack of the government help to get in front of program offices, right? I find it to be pretty mind-boggling that, it's almost like if a VC was going to invest in a company and they have a bunch of relationships and they refuse to make introductions, right, to help the company grow. We kind of do the same thing, right? We don't really have a mechanism for companies that got money from the taxpayer to be invested in their company to do some cyber work, and yet they deliver some type of MVP or whatever they do, and then there is no next phase, right, ready streamlined to help put this in front of big program offices like F-35 or GBSD or B-21. How do you guys end up at the Outpost? I guess is your model also bridging that gap, or do you stop at the cyber phase, or how do you help company with that struggle?
Yeah, 100%. So at the Outpost, our job is to help companies really bridge that valley of death in understanding who to talk to inside of government. Let's say you've gotten a phase 1 or a phase 2 for the SBIR program, or you've gotten a contract through a commercial solutions opening. Like, well, where do I go next?
Can you tell people, you mentioned the commercial solution opening, for people that don't know, just tell us a little bit what's the difference, I guess.
Yeah. The SBIR program is the Small Business Innovation Research Program. It's about $3 billion of money set aside a year across the DoD for funding research and development projects that are related to the DoD space. And then there's the things like commercial solutions opening, which is a vehicle to say, hey, we want to prototype a technology, a new innovative technology, and we want to see how that applies to a specific capability or problem set. So there's a lot of different contract vehicles that are out there to engage with government. And as a company, you have to figure out which are the right ways to get introduced inside of the DoD space. What contract vehicles are the pathways you can open up the right conversations? Which ones will allow you to say, hey, we're prototyping and just testing out a capability, and that will then allow you to turn around and scale. One of the beautiful things about the SBIR and STTR programs is that it gives a company a sole source authority for companies to continue winning government contracts. So it says, hey, if you've delivered this specific capability, the US federal government has to actually come to you directly for that capability going forward. Well, that's not something that's super well enforced, but it's something that as a company, if you can go to a government stakeholder and say, hey, this is a capability that we have, and you can actually come directly to us because of the sole source justification, it's a fantastic way to get engaged. And, this is only an hour and a half long show, but there are tons of other vehicles that we can also jump into and talk about. And that, the Outpost, we help with all of these things. We have a prior contracting officer on our team. We have a team of 20 folks that have been a part of founding a lot of these organizations and help driving their success inside the military. Now we're helping opening up those doors and explaining to companies, what are your contract vehicles? Who do you talk to? How do you engage with them? And what do you actually take in that next step?
Yeah, and Andy was saying, that he awarded a lot of SBIR phase 2, and hundreds, and only one made it to phase 3. Obviously, succeeding in DoD doesn't always mean you get a phase 3, right? You can actually go from a phase 2 to just contracts and still deliver value. But his point also is to say, hey, too many companies are just relying on SBIRs, and I see it a lot. I see, companies see it as free money, right? Which is kind of is, but not really, but a little bit. But the fact is, you also can sell, right? You can actually be on a contract vehicle where people buy your products, buy your licenses, buy your services. So you don't have only to go through SBIRs, right?
Correct. And I would say that a lot of those companies that are struggling through the SBIR process it's part of that learning and journey, right? Not every company is going to have a fit inside of government. And if you're actually taking a look at transition rates of R&D in the commercial space, about 1 to 10% of the companies that are going to engage with a top tier firm, and you can consider the DoD a top tier firm that they're trying to sell to, only about 1 to 10% of those will actually transition or become a core capability of a large enterprise. And so if you're taking a look at scale, how is the SBIR program working? I would actually argue it's phenomenally effective for sorting through which companies can have a meaningful capability delivery to the DoD and which ones the DoD actually needs or wants. So they've found a customer, they've engaged with those folks on understanding, hey, this is the capability we need to deliver. These are the requirements that we can deliver it in. And those companies are also willing to go that step further and actually understand the requirements to get an ATO, to work on the high side. They can get the clearances in place, right? There's a lot of further discovery that needs to happen as you're diving into how do you work with government. That's part of what whittles down the 100% of companies are not going to transition and work with government. That's not a realistic number. It's also not what we want. We want competition to exist. We want the best companies to rise to the top, and we want the best capabilities to be delivered as well.
Yeah, no doubt. So let's talk a little bit about what you think would be the right incentives to motivate both, I guess, the right government customers, but also more importantly, the companies. What do you use? What do you see resonate? I mean, we talk about some of the reasons before, right? The mission, all that stuff. But when you talk to customers, pragmatically on the financial side, they have stakeholder, they have to do right by them, right? So how do we convince companies to do this?
Yeah, and I'd say the first thing that it starts out with is quicker response times, right? These companies are moving quickly. They want to see that, hey, there's a viable pathway inside of government. So we need to be able to, companies need to get a response within 60 days, right? And that should be the benchmark for everybody, that if they're submitting to a contract, you're hearing a response within 60 days. You're also, as a government organization, right, you should be able to say, this is the total value of the opportunity that exists, right? They need to know if the market value is it going to be $1 million opportunity, or is this potentially up to a $10 to $100 million opportunity? Mm-hmm. And then we need to be able to,
because you don't even have to say anything about budget, right? You can just say, I mean, it could be $1, or you don't know.
Yep. And often, there's not a clear explanation on how many awards are going to be given or how much the value is behind that. So sharing that from the government's perspective would help a lot of those companies. Like, hey, I'm looking to apply. Well, hey, there's going to be 15 awards here. They're about $3 million a piece, right? That puts us in a range that, hey, that's worth taking the time to respond and engage in that process. It's also important for there to be feedback in, hey, you're doing those evaluations as government. Provide the feedback to those companies of what was better, what didn't work so well in the response. Be clear about the evaluation criteria. Often government needs to host like Ask Me Anythings, similar to this format for, hey, if you want to engage with government, here's a chance to ask those questions. It's not just, hey, let me submit a email question to this. We want to have companies talk to real people inside of government so that they understand what's going through the contract process. Another key incentive is bringing both the end user and the customers into the conversation as you're putting things on contract. And by that, I mean, you want to make sure that there is a real connection to delivering something that the warfighter needs. They want to be able to do that feasibility, that customer discovery, so that those conversations are happening. You're developing and understanding how can this actually be executed within the framework that the military has. And then the customer needs to know and say, hey, I'm actually planning for this to be brought into a long-term capability for, we have budget line items inside of government. And when government is looking at that, those budgets are planned 2 to 4 years out sometimes. They need to be able to say, hey, this capability you're delivering, we can slot that in this timeline. And so that's, if you take a look at the incentives, it's about paying quickly. It's about making sure that you actually are talking to the right end users and the right stakeholders. And it's going to be clear expectations. And sort of like, what is the long-term delivery or scope here?
Yeah, no doubt. So it's really a lot of the stuff that the government has to do. What about the companies, right? A lot of these guys also live in the Silicon Valley bubble, right? I had a very, I guess I would not call it heated, but I was pretty upset about it. Conversation with an AI company, that was telling me, they are spending some time trying to do some deals in DoD on the business side of DoD, and they were, always insisting on the business side of DoD, right? And I was like, what about the warfighter side? This is why the DoD exists. We're not here to do business stuff. If you want to do business stuff, go to the VA. I don't know. But they're like, yeah, we don't want to be involved in weapon stuff. And even for stuff like, hey, you talked about, using AI to do some type of image recognition of satellite imagery and stuff. They had no interest helping that kind of stuff, despite knowing how to do it, by the way. And I just, find it frustrating that they're willing to take the money, some piece of the money at least, right? And pretending, they're not getting their hands dirty or whatever it is they believe in, right? So I'm like, so you're willing to take the money, but only when it's business stuff. So you don't believe in the mission then. If you don't believe in the mission, why are you taking the money, right? It's kind of, you're trying to be like righteous and, almighty, but you still take the money, right? So it's that just makes me so upset, and look,
And Nick,
I understand the line, right, with like killing stuff, right? But I told people many times that better imagery recognition would have probably saved life or prevented, for example, the Afghanistan debacle where we bombed the bus that had 13 kids because we didn't know better, right? If we had the technology that we were working on with Google and Project Maven at the time, and if they didn't stop it just because of a few hundred people complaining about it, we would probably have avoided that kind of nonsense. And so people see it as, hey, we don't want to kill people, but you can also save lives, right?
Yeah. And so 2 things I wanted to highlight there is one, that we're the Department of Defense, and the point of the Department of Defense is to defend our freedoms. It is not to go out and kill people. That's not the purpose of the Department of Defense, right? It's to defend the American values. And sometimes that does involve the pointy end of the stick of saying, hey, that you do need to go kill people to get the mission done. But also, right, there's a large part of the DoD that is not the pointy end of the spear. There are a lot of things that have to do with maintenance and logistics and operations and cyber that are not about killing, but it's about defending and running a business operation that is the U.S. military. The military has about 3 million plus people as part of the operation. It's the largest organization in the world, and it has the most employees if you take a look at the DoD as a whole. And so there's a lot that has to happen for those commercial businesses that they can get involved in the defense apparatus that don't have to do with the pointy end of the stick. But Nick, you were specifically pointing out, like, hey, what incentives do those companies have to work with the Department of Defense? Well, I would say that there's stable revenue opportunities for those companies to work. There's an opportunity to work on meaningful problem sets. There's an opportunity to work with a core capability development that might be pushing the technology forward that you can turn around and then tech transfer and apply that to the commercial side and grow your commercial business. And a key thing is, right, a company has to decide what their identity is, and if they're willing to contribute to the defense of our nation. the defense of the values that we collectively believe in as a nation. And that's what the Department of Defense exists for. I work at the Outpost, and I'm part of this community because I believe in the overall values that our nation has. And a company has to decide, right? Are you fully into that conversation? Are you, ready to accept that in order to defend our values and what we believe, that we sometimes have to do things like harm other people and kill other people, part of the pointy end of the spear, to defend those values. And sometimes that has to happen because that's the brutal reality of our world today. But the stronger defense that we have, the more it can deter actors from being a part of engaging with us. And it also allows for us to do things, as you mentioned, right? The tragedies can be avoided if we have the amazing capabilities that our commercial sector can bring to bear. We can prevent a lot of tragedies from happening and save a lot of people. The DoD has a phenomenal track record in being part of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief all across the world. And we often, in the DoD and the commercial side, that's overlooked of how much work and help is given to supporting nations and helping them grow.
Yeah, no doubt. And, the fact is, China is not waiting for us to figure it out. And when I see, AI companies not want to be involved in AI weapons, I understand. The fact is, China is building those weapons, so you don't want to be the one without it. And, like the deterrence on the nuclear side, you don't want to be without the deterrence, right? The deterrence can actually save lives, more than actually using the weapons, right? So it's just a matter of having the capabilities that we need to defend the nation, with the hope that we never have to use it, right? But if we have to use it, it better work, right? It better be good. And so we need to be proactive for that. And that's why I tell people, it's not just about killing people. It's also about saving lives. It's sometimes, what you got to do. Maybe, 5-6 people have to die to save thousands, so, I'm a little frustrated by the younger generation in the Silicon Valley bubble that I call living in the kumbaya world, where they benefit and enjoy all the freedom that they're given thanks to the sacrifices of the war fighter, but then they don't realize it. So that's I remember speaking at KubeCon a few times, and every time at the end, people come and shake your hand. I had the largest audience, probably 2,500 people, and I would at least 5-6 of them would show up and wait in line to not shake my hand and tell me that I had too much blood on my hand and killing babies with jets because we put Kubernetes on jets. So anyway, it's what it is. Those kids need to wake up and join us in the real world. But they told me they had to go spend a little bit of time in the puppy room, to recover from my my keynote. So that's what they do. They put puppy rooms now in conferences, right, to go and pet puppies, because conferences are so stressful. You need puppies to recover. That's the kind of generation we're creating. But anyway,
but Nick, like diving into that a little bit, right? It's about helping and communicate that, hey, these are the shared values that we're trying to defend, and that's
right.
not going to be accepted by everybody. But that's part of the beauty of our nation, right? Is that we can allow people to say, no, we don't want to be a part of that. No, we don't want to be involved.
Oh yeah.
Do
whatever you want.
Yeah, but it's that collective defense, right? Like that we're coming together to say, hey, people will start being a part of the process and realize that we have to defend our nation. Otherwise, we won't exist.
We won't have it.
So you have to bring these capabilities.
For some reason, they just believe everybody is nice and happy, and we're the one attacking others for no reason. And so it's almost like we're creating the problems. And sometimes we've done that, So maybe they have a point sometimes. But the fact is, most of the time it's not the case. But it's just a matter of realizing we live in a real world.
Yeah, and I've been there at the pointy end of the spear and been there in those missions, and I can tell you that all of the people that I have worked with are people that have their hearts in the right place, that are doing the right thing. And when mistakes happen, it tears these people apart. And it's not something that the military takes lightly in any way, shape, or form. But the people I've served with have the hearts in the right place and are doing the right thing every day.
Yeah, no doubt. So anyway, we talked about all this good stuff. So now let's talk about some of the solutions, right? We talked a little bit about SBIRs and CSOs. What are the funding mechanisms that exist, I guess?
Yeah. So at a high level, the DoD has $3 billion of R&D funding that's going out each year. And this allows for companies to get involved and say, hey, what is our customer discovery feasibility study? How are we delivering to a new capability that the government needs, specifically the military needs? Then there are hundreds of millions of dollars that are being put out via commercial solutions openings, via other transactions, via basic ordering agreements, broad area announcements. These are all open vehicles that are out there. And when you're looking at a funding mechanism for a startup, what you want to find is, hey, what's the organization you want to work with? What R&D funding do they have available? What delivery fund, like operations funding, do they have available? And when's the next contract vehicle that they're going to be pushing out? You're seeing a lot of great communication coming from military organizations through the public conferences, that they're sharing the timelines nowadays of, hey, here's when we expect the next contract opportunity to open up. Here's how much we expect it to be. That's not happening in 100% of military organizations, but if you're going to the military conferences, you're starting to see more and more of that being communicated to. One of the best ones that we helped reshape inside of the Air Force, I'd argue, is the SBIR program. It's a great open door into the Air Force. It's a $75,000 3-month contract to do customer discovery and feasibility analysis with the U.S. Air Force, figuring out who your potential customer is, how can your technology be applied. That goes into a phase 2. That's a $1.25 million contract where you can, for 12 to 24 months, where you're delivering that capability and you're proving out with your end customer, hey, this is something that they actually want to build and deliver. Then there's opportunities to go to phase 3 there, where you're working directly with that government customer and they're paying for that development. So as you're looking at funding mechanisms, I would say it's highly dependent upon which organization you're a part of or wanting to work with. What are the mechanisms there for? Are they moving into operations? Are they sustaining? Or are they doing R&D work? And how do you pull all of that together? And it's something that we help dive into for whichever organization you're looking at. Nick, if you're speaking, I can't hear you.
Sorry, muted. Forgot to push the button. I have too many mute buttons, Although this one has a light, so I should see it. It's a bright light of multicolor changing, between purple and blue and green. So other people are asking me about this SBIR reauthorization thing that's happening. People are worried, Congress, since they're mostly a bunch of old people that don't know how to turn on a smartphone still to this day, and we want to do term limits, but they will never do it. And they still don't understand much about the world. They're worried they're gonna stop this SBIR program. What's happening with this SBIR reauthorization?
Yeah, the reauthorization is in FY22. And so it looks like it is currently stalled out, and it's supposed to be a part of the FY23 NDAA and be reauthorized as part of that process.
So, so just to clarify, if it's not signed by the end of 22, then you have no SBIR.
Correct. The SBIR authorization ends on September 30th of this year. And so
it was for how long they did the first one? Was the first one for?
Oh, I think I don't know that off the top of my head.
5 years?
They did the reauthorization, I think, in 2017 for another 5 years. But this program's been around, I think, since the 1960s. It's been a long time since the program's been around. I should know that and look that up. I will after this.
That's okay. Dates don't matter that much.
But part of the reason that there's a lot of frustration and questions about the SBIR program is a lot of the data that was coming out about the companies transitioning through leveraging phase 1 or phase 2 dollars. The intent of the SBIR and STTR programs is that companies are developing technology and then commercializing that technology so dual use businesses can exist. I would argue that in some areas of government, the SBIR program has been executed phenomenally. And whether it's with NIH or NASA, those programs were executing really, really well in making sure those technologies actually transition to the commercial space. If you look at some of the data, DoD is the largest spender of SBIR money. It's actually a 3% tax on all R&D funding, with DoD having the largest budget. In turn, we have the largest SBIR and STTR budget. But a lot of, Senator Rand Paul was taking and looking at like, hey, what's the transition rate for companies? How many of those companies are getting multiple SBIR contracts, and why are they just living as a company off of research?
There are some scams there, right? I mean, there are some companies that just live off SBIRs, right?
There were,
and even like founders that just keep creating new companies and move. That's despicable, though, right?
It was, right, and there was a lot of data pointing towards that. But I would argue that in the last 5 years, we've changed that dynamic, right? I was part of the team that helped reshape the SBIR program for the Air Force, and that's led to changes across the other services as well, where they're looking more at how are we truly getting dual use tech inside of the DoD? How are you getting a company that has commercial viability, that they are actually selling commercially? What are the evaluation criteria for companies that, do they have traction? Do they have commercial customers? Do they have, what's the revenue that they have from these products? So the SBIR reauthorization is stuck right now because Congress is questioning, rightly so, that some of the data was pointing towards SBIR mills and companies not transitioning. But if you take a look at the last 5 or so years of data, especially coming from the Air Force side, which is the largest spender of SBIR dollars, is that we've changed and shifted the narrative. There are more companies that are dual use that are a part of the SBIR program now than there ever were before. Those companies are transitioning to programs of record at a higher rate than ever before, which is those phase 3s is what they want to call those government contracts. And you're getting a large percentage of these companies to scale in ways that they were not when the program had different incentives behind it. And so the SBIR reauthorization is currently going to go to the Senate. It'll be part of the NDAA for 23. We'll see if the NDAA is signed before recess, before September 30th, or we're going to end up with another continuing resolution.
That's never the case. Congress doesn't know how to do their job. So that would actually mean for this time, unlike other contracts that can still continue, I guess, you would not be able to do new SBIRs, right? Because the reauthorization has ended.
Yeah, so that's the unknown because the SBIR budget is off of 3% off of the top line R&D budget. And so there not being a authorization for that, I think it's going to be a very interesting time that if it's not renewed by September 30th, we're going to see a gap in the program. I'm pretty confident that the SBIR program is going to get renewed. There's been tremendous benefits and amazing companies that have come out of the SBIR program as a whole. I think that unfortunately the timeline may not be what the DoD and the U.S. government wants.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that the Air Force is the largest, I guess, user of SBIRs. Is it because of the total R&D budget, and because it's a percentage of that, right? The 3%. Is it why we're the biggest consumer of it, or is it because of you like it? Oh, what's the reasoning, I guess?
Yeah, the SBIR program is a 3% tax on the R&D budget of an organization that has over $100 million of R&D. And so the Air Force has the largest R&D budget of all of the services. And the Air Force, that's why the Air Force has the largest SBIR, STTR budget. The Army and the Navy also have large SBIR, STTR budgets as well.
How much do you know the difference? I mean, are we talking like 20%? Is it big or is it just a small?
It's about 10 to 20%, right? You're looking at like 3 main services. It's $3 billion approximately over all 3 services.
Interesting. But overall, so even if it is reauthorized and makes it into the NDAA, which is not 100% sure, but pretty likely, right? There's still a risk of gaps, right? Because of the fact that they're not going to freaking sign it.
Yeah, I expect, just if I was a betting man, that we probably won't have any SBIRs this fall. And it's something that might get sorted out in early.
So, I mean, they're going to have to double the one in spring?
Yeah, so the money still has to be spent, right? So that's the nice thing is that
We're good at doing that, huh?
yeah, there
Spending
might
the
not be
money.
a solicitation this fall if the budget
Right.
doesn't get passed, if the authorization doesn't get passed. But then that money will still have to be spent. It'll just be in a compressed time frame. So you'll see larger
That
awards.
means that, by the way, you know what that does? That will mean to more abuse, more fraud, and less quality because the government people will be completely swamped with the
So
double the work in 1 quarter, right?
I don't agree with that, Nick, because
Mm.
I would say that the evaluation process that folks are going through, that Air Force has figured out how to scale that. They're
Yeah.
doing over, they get over 1,000 submissions for some of these rounds.
Do you think they
And
can
they've,
take double that?
yeah, I think that they have built
Yeah.
the capacity. The Africa team, right, since I've left, have done a phenomenal job in building out the capacity to do those evaluations at scale, right? That's what that
Mm.
team has been focused on. And they've been looking at how do you bring in the right talent to evaluate, like, hey, we want to have the right cyber folks evaluating cyber proposals. We want to have the right folks that know about directed energy evaluating directed energy proposals. They're doing a great job about scaling out that on the back end. And I would say that even if they have to do 2,000 submissions for the next round, you're probably not going to see that large of a jump, right, in submissions between if there's one gap there that I would actually
Right.
say
Right.
hurts the submissions because as we were talking about, right, consistency, short timelines are the lifeblood of those startups. So I'd actually say
Yeah.
it's more likely to reduce the amount of submissions and
Mm.
increase the quality of submissions just based off of the macro factors in the environment.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. All right. So let's move completely. I mean, not completely, but a little bit to what's going on now, more even more recently with Taiwan, right? What would you say with what's going on now? What would be the impact to the nation with what might happen and what's going on right now? When you see, the importance of Taiwan, of course, for chips and other things. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so we touched on this a little bit earlier in the conversation. You were talking about how the U.S. and other countries, right, have realized there's a global dependence, and there's certain products like penicillin or chip supply that is concentrated in very few countries. And specifically for Taiwan, TSMC has done a phenomenal job being a foundry and developing chips for tons and tons of other nations, right? And these chips are the foundational pieces that are going to be in your appliances. So your fridge, your coffee maker, to
Your
your
car.
car, to your computer, to your phone, right? Chips are now part of like every single thing that we're doing. Hey, the speaker that I have, right? There's a chip in there that makes this work. And then and every key part of what we're up to. And so with what's happening in Taiwan right now, the U.S. finally did, and it was a great thing that we passed the CHIPS Act, right? That's a $52 billion investment into developing and broadening that capability here stateside, because chips are a foundational capability of all of our military technologies and capabilities as well, right? When it comes to putting in warheads, all the way to getting our computer systems to work so our airmen and guardians and sailors can talk to each other. With what's happening in Taiwan, I actually think this is, and post-COVID, I think the
Yeah.
U.S. is actually having a great reawakening that we need to be able to foster and encourage the development of critical capabilities here stateside, whether that is
Mm-hmm.
specific food production, additive manufacturing production, chip production. We're seeing what's happening around Taiwan with China's military drills surrounding the island, recognizing that, hey, it's not gonna be a shootout war in Taiwan. They're going to try to strangle the nation there, and they're going to try to slowly cut off exports. They're going to threaten the country, and that's how they're slowly going to exert their soft power, as they did in Hong Kong. And the U.S., we can't turn on chip production tomorrow. Taiwan has an expertise for creating integrated circuits from the whole supply chain there, of how do you develop the infrastructure to do so, to how do you have the specific technological parts to build these capabilities, to the not students, but the employees, right? To the professional expertise that you need to develop that capability. So I think, our nation is really awakening to the fact that we need to create more centers of excellence of providing these capabilities at scale. And I actually think this is a larger reawakening that's happening across all of the US, that technology innovation isn't just happening in Silicon Valley anymore. You're starting to see amazing hubs being stood up across all of the United States, where you're seeing, okay, Dayton, Ohio is doubling down on digital engineering and saying, okay, we are the best hub for this capability in the nation. You're seeing Detroit doubling down on additive manufacturing. They're taking the old spaces for car manufacturing and saying, hey, we can be the best additive manufacturing space in the nation. You're seeing Austin become a critical tech hub for our nation. And you're seeing that there's this identity and resurgence across America. And this is what I'm super excited about for the next 15 to 20 years, is that we're going to start to see different technology hubs stand up across these smaller entrepreneurial communities, especially as talent is getting redispersed and we're investing back into the American economy, that we're going to keep building up more technology hubs that are like, hey, this is going to be the best quantum hub in the nation. And you might find that in like a Boise, Idaho. And the cool part about that is this will really empower and show, right, the beauty of what America has to offer is that entrepreneurship technology can be developed anywhere. And we have access to supporting the right resources and the right ecosystems to build out those critical capabilities.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so important, right? I remember back in the day, whether people like Donald Trump or not, he was one of the more recent one to stop pushing the America First agenda and trying to fix some of that mess. And people were making fun of him, of course, calling him a racist against China to bring stuff back here. And now they're like, yeah, we should probably do that. But what's interesting is you see companies like Apple, right? That obviously are massive in terms of their manufacturing in China. And China said, well, if you bring chips from Taiwan and you don't label the chips as made in China, then we won't let them in the country. So now they forced, Apple did, of course, forced the Taiwanese companies building chips to change the labels on the product to say it was made in China, effectively giving exactly what China wanted. And that's a U.S. company. It's despicable. But I guess money talks, right? And they're so dependent on China for their production and we're so happy to buy these super expensive phones with barely any innovation every year that they keep selling to us for some reason. And we're willing to buy every year with no improvements other than a better camera that does nothing to us. But that's what we see, right? It's pretty mind-boggling to me. I just can't understand how we're in a situation where literally we cannot make penicillin in the United States without China. That sounds just if you go back in time and tell that to people 50 years ago, they would laugh you out of the room. They would think you're crazy, right?
Yeah, but business incentives and globalization have completely changed, right? That it is cheaper to manufacture in China than it is in the United States. And we haven't figured out the right tariff structure or the right incentives to normalize that trade and the development here stateside. But I would also say that maybe we should focus on the next generation of technologies. And China has owned this market of manufacturing, replicating cheap goods. Maybe we keep the expertise in developing cutting edge technologies around biotech or quantum.
Yeah, I guess the only issue is we realize also the basic stuff is pretty important to survive. So if we're completely dependent on them for all the basics of life, we can't even focus on building the fancy stuff because we can't even freaking get medicine to not get sick. So it's just, it's like COVID, right? They were the ones sending us the masks, right? It's just, let's create, let's make the largest pandemic in history. And then, at least, not maybe in history, but at least pretty impactful to the nation. And then they sell us the masks, that goes along with it. It's pretty fun. Anyway, it's just what it is.
Yeah. And that is the big change that I would say is happening in the world, right? Is that we're going to see a lot of nations bringing in manufacturing capability to their own countries and sustaining that. But that's also, right, that don't necessarily know if that's something that we can bring all stateside, right? I don't know if that's a sustainable answer. Maybe the answer is that you have to do it in friendly countries, right? You have that network in
Or
friendly
diversity, right?
countries.
Maybe why just one? You could easily pick 5, 6 countries and spread it at least, right? You're less
Yep.
dependent on one, But there's also the fact that it used to be pretty cheap, but now they hold us so much that we would be willing to pay whatever price they want. They were smart enough to start very cheap and be like, well, come bring us all the stuff, and then slowly but surely they're like, well, we're going to need a little bit more margin here and here. And slowly but surely, like, I don't know if the difference is that much anymore, but I mean, it's still significant, but it's not as much as it used to be, that's for sure. But anyway, so we talked about Taiwan, right? But what actions do you think we need to take as a nation, right, to ensure we do win against China?
So doubling down on things like the CHIPS Act, doubling down on U.S. manufacturing of critical goods and capabilities, whether that's refining and smelting titanium so that we can produce the titanium alloys, to producing medicine, to producing critical core components and chips, to making sure we have the food supply and basic raw materials to produce, whatever the next good we need is. The first thing is, right, to shore up our capabilities as a nation or as a team of nations across the world that we're allies with, and build up those industries to know that in a pandemic, in a war, we still have the freedom of being able to develop and continue to grow those capabilities and technologies. So that's the first key thing that we need to do. The second thing we need to do, I think, is as a nation understand, hey, there's a lot of political leanings left and right and changes as every president comes, and there's not necessarily a national voice that we have, right? We need to double down on, hey, as a nation, we're here to protect our values of freedom and democracy and liberty and justice, and that we have to be able to come together as a national voice to say, this is a direction of our country and where we want to go. And that has to start with families being able to take care of each other, there being opportunities for education, right? Let's focus on the things America can do better and take care of our own people and build upon that. So that way, whatever the next threat is, we're able to counter it. We need to focus more on dual use tech, right? Create more of those billion-dollar competitors. So that specifically in the defense space, where we have the variety and capabilities in the defense industrial base. We need to identify the tech hubs across the United States and double down on putting in investment in those communities. And we need to foster a stronger education system as well. It's one of my personal things I would love to see.
So all these things are barely happening, right? I mean, look, the fact is, whether we like it or not, we're barely scratching the surface in terms of getting these things done. I mean, we feel pretty good about it, right? See some improvements, but it's still not where we need to be, particularly when you consider the volume of population. We're talking about 4 times more people, but also they have 112 million, I think I read recently, science technology, graduates, which is, a third of the United States right there. So, that gives me a lot of anxiety, In fact, since I had kids, I can tell you, that's why I've been so frustrated and why I have less and less patience for like the bureaucracy and all the discussions, and time is for action, right? And there's some anecdotal, I would say, progress, but I mean, we help push this the chip law that you just mentioned, that we pushed that for 5 years. Finally, some investment is made. I mean, sure, that's not bad, but it's not going to make a massive difference. It's somewhat significant, but it's not enough compared to what China does, right? So overall, if you look at the likelihood, right, if you take your 20 years from now and you try to jump in time, how are we doing? I mean, is it like a, hey, we need to wake up now, DEFCON 1, or is it just like, okay, we have time and we can figure it out?
Yeah, I'm not a believer that we have that time and that luxury of time. These are problems that are going to take decades to solve, and we need to be taking massive action to work on them now. And to answer your question of like how do we change that mindset, it's That's the hardest part. The culture change, changing the mindset of our nation to say we need to double down on these investments and focus on sort of this long-term vision is something we struggle with as a nation. And we need to take a serious look at, hey, where are our priorities and what are we trying to defend here? And that conversation is only going to happen and change by the one-on-one conversations like we're having and with the audience that we have here today. That we need to focus on, hey, we want to make more investments in our education system. We want to make more investments in our manufacturing sector. And I'd say that the amazing thing that'll happen is that you're going to see different small communities across, like, hey, in Denver, right? They're doubling down on the space capabilities that are out here. There's a great space community being developed in Colorado Springs to Boulder, Colorado. There's a lot of space companies that are being developed. You'll see a lot more investment from the city and the state into these kinds of companies. And creating more of those public-private partnerships with the military will allow that industry to grow a lot faster. I would say that the military has a unique position in this because the DoD has the largest budget of any portion of the U.S. government. You can actually drive a lot of technological success and development through the lens of the Department of Defense, which is why I do the work that I do, right? I still get to stay tangential to the DoD space. I get to help tech companies and we get to help stand up these industrial hubs. But we need to keep moving faster. We need to keep building on our culture and improving. And I'd say that movement is happening. I'm seeing hundreds and thousands of people that are a part of this movement. And I want to, you're a part of this as well. Thank you for doing this and having this talk so we can continue building upon the momentum that we have to recognize it's not about which president is in office. It's about what are the capabilities that America has to deliver? What are opportunities that we can do to make our nation a better place for our children?
Yeah, and that should resonate with everybody, right? And in fact, I would argue the reason why we're so divided right now is mostly because of China and kind of spreading this kind of communism, nonsense into the schools and spreading this and kind of dividing the nation, fighting, but there's also like a complacency aspect, right? Where when you win for too long, at least you feel like you're winning for too long. You feel like it's not important. No one can come and take what you have, right? And that's a dangerous thing. We've seen it with companies, right? Completely disappear, and companies, you move on. We've seen Empire do the same, right? But people don't know the history anymore. I've seen so many videos on YouTube of kids being asked who was the first U.S. president. That lady said George Bush. This can't be real, It's just, what are we teaching our kids? You talk about education, right? I tried to partner with universities. Many of them reach out to me proactively themselves, reaching out to me to get content on digital transformation, DevSecOps, cyber, and they all wanted my stuff, right? But they didn't want to update the content more than every 5 years. I said, I'm not going to associate my name with some type of curriculum that's going to get stale and useless, So I said, hey, at least do 3 years, come on. Meet me in the middle. I wanted 1 year. They wanted 5. I said, hey, let's do 3. And they're like, nope, we're not going to do that. so that's why I created Learn with Nick, because I didn't want to do this, but there's just, I had no option. It's just mind-boggling. The whole education system, right, is pretty broken, right? And we're teaching the wrong things. You look at China starting to invest in education in AI at 7 years old, we don't even teach kids how to write and read anymore. It's worse than it's ever been. We don't teach the history of the nation, the values, right? There's no more anthem. I didn't have that in France. We don't do that, in France because we're separate school and stuff. But I don't know. But I assume when you were younger, the anthem was part of your education, or was that already gone when you were growing up?
It was. We did the Pledge of Allegiance in class, and that I wouldn't necessarily say like that is the core pinnacle of what's going to have us define our values, but right, it's a key part of that, and an important piece of saying, hey, we're a part of a larger nation together. But Nick, you said, hey, you're going to stand up the Learn with Nick school at the end of the month, and I'd say that is how we start restoring and challenging some of these barriers that we see, right? Where you're going to see institutions that are successful because they are willing to learn and adapt within a 12-month cycle instead of a 60-month cycle. And you're going to see that those are the companies that are able to compete on the world stage going forward. And I'd bet on the American spirit. Yeah, there are challenges and there always will be, but I'd bet on the American people and the American spirit that those are the people that are going to lean in, start creating new innovations and technologies, and we as a nation will rally behind those people and those opportunities. And it's a hope. It's not a plan, but it's something that I'd say that we can keep doubling down on and keep building those enterprises, keep building businesses, because I'd say entrepreneurship and business is probably the number one way to impact the world today.
Yeah. So you've been deployed to Afghanistan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's I think it's a year anniversary. I don't know if that we call that an anniversary or not, but that's a sad anniversary, I guess, of the U.S. leaving the nation. What have you seen, particularly with Warfighter, right? Do you feel like, we're having a tough time, obviously, attracting talent? Some people say it's because people are fat and we can't find people in shape to come and serve. I don't know if that's a real, if it's a real thing, but I'm sure we're fat, but I'm fat, that's for sure. But I don't know if that's good enough. But what do you feel like
trying to ask
Warfighter are saying now? Do you feel like it's harder to find people motivated because of what happened in Afghanistan? I guess did they feel like when no one held accountable, they just people just do that and there's no consequences. People lose the faith in serving.
I would say, so this is my personal opinion, right? That the withdrawal from Afghanistan we could have done better, right? We know that for sure, right? And there were,
I think that's the end of statement of the year. Yes.
And it was deeply personal for me, something that I still struggle with. And, as we think about that and working through that, but your bigger question there was how does that impacted sort of the morale of the military and the recruitment, an ability to recruit folks for our nation. And I would say that that is one factor among a lot of other macro factors in terms of like health and fitness, in terms of willingness to serve, that we have a lot of people who are disinterested in engaging with the military. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was debauchery in some ways and terrible execution. And that doesn't put a good face on what the military does. But going back to one of my comments earlier, right, the heart of the military, the people that are a part of that process, were all doing the best that they could with the information that we had. And I think
the leadership failure anyway, it's not the Warfighter failure, right? It's the leadership, messing up.
Yeah, and mistakes have been made, but we have to learn from them. That's one of the key things
Are we learning? Are we learning though? I don't know. Are we learning?
Yes. Yeah, we are.
I think some of us are learning. I don't know if they're learning, but I feel like they always come up with excuses, right? It's just like, it was never a good time to leave. Sure, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the timing. We're talking about how. The how. Stop with it. Why can people just say, we're messed up, and just why do we have to always come up with excuses, right? We can't just own it. At least do that, right? People died, just own it.
And that is one thing I think is important, right? As a leader and individual myself, right? You have to own the mistakes that you make. And we made a mistake in that withdrawal, and I will own that part, right? That we can do better, and we will do better.
Did you see a lot of people talking about leaving the department? Obviously you're still reservist, but you decided to live, active duty full time, right? To go to the Outpost. What was the big push? Was it just I wanted to see other things? You've done plenty, right? So you don't have to stay longer. But was there something that was pushing you to? Was it frustration? I know I was frustrated for sure.
Yeah,
I think people know that.
Yeah. So it's actually a fun fact in my story that I actually left active duty in 2017. And the reason that I left
that.
was because my career field functional said, no, I can't go start AFWorks. And I can't go build work in the innovation space. And I was frustrated, right? As an officer, as an airman, I saw that there are pathways that we can build things, make things better. And I wanted to go into the startup space. I'd started a couple of companies before that in 2014 and was building those, deployed to Afghanistan, shut those down. But what I wanted to do was go be in the startup space. And it was through the connections I'd mentioned earlier in my story, that through a connection I made in college, Steve and I got reconnected. We actually ended up, there's a longer story there that I'll tell over a drink sometime of how we ended up meeting in Qatar. But we got together and I was like, I want to be a part of this movement to make the Air Force a better place. And right, DIUX was stood up at the time. I'd gone out and visited them and I was like, I want to be a part of this. I want whatever it takes. And what it took for me at that time was separating active duty and going to a full-time reserve job for the next 3.5 years.
Full-time reserve? I didn't even know that. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so, there was a 68-day period there, right, that I didn't get paid. I just was like, I'm going to show up. I'm going to keep doing it. And 68 days later, my paperwork got transferred and I finally was able to go in the reserves. I was trying to work every day, right? Like show up and like, hey, where's my paperwork? Hey, how can I get involved? Hey, I'm right here to start doing stuff. But I left active duty because of the frustration of, hey, I want to make the Air Force a better place. I was given sort of like a golden ticket and an opportunity to work with a world-class team in founding AFWorks, and all of the amazing peers and friends I've met along the way that inspired me to keep serving. Because over the last few years that we built AFWorks, worked on Platform One, and when I was on the government side of things, it was truly an opportunity to build a movement of people who want to make the Air Force and make the world a better place. Because this isn't the military that they joined. This is the military that they're building and we're building every day. And that was what inspired me to keep serving as a reservist, because I wanted to keep doing that. And that's also part of why I'm still in the Air Force Reserves and my side job. And Outpost is what I do full time, because I get to stay at that intersection of tech, national security, and capital.
That's very exciting. I mean, I wasn't tracking the journey there. That's pretty fun. Obviously, we'll thank you for your service there. Obviously, you made a massive difference. So I guess now you're on the commercial side and still reservist, but let's assume we're talking about the Outpost now. How do you guys at the Outpost help companies with all the stuff we just described? What's the model? How do you do it?
Yeah. So we talked earlier about, hey, there's a lot of complex ways of how do you engage with government? What contract vehicles are out there? Who should we start talking to? We at the Outpost, we help answer those questions. We see ourselves as a talent extension for companies that want to work with the DoD and want to work with government. We help you understand who you should talk to inside of the government space, what to do on the BD side, who to engage with, how do you build that relationship, understanding what's the next contract vehicle. We also have an amazing proposal team. We'll help with that proposal creation, submission, and we will also help you with managing those contracts afterwards. We have a team of 20 people. We have myself and Dave, prior founders at AFWorks. We have Matt, prior founder at SpaceWorks. We have folks from the Army side. We have a prior contracting officer on our team, a creative director, proposal writer. And so we have a stacked team here. I'd say it's the A+ team. We've been there, we've done that, we've created this, we've been successful in helping companies navigate not only the SBIR process all the way up to StratFi, TACFi, but also commercial solutions openings, broad area announcements, CSOs, FAR-based contracts. Our job is to help companies win. And we do that through a business model engagement. And I'm happy to talk to folks about that more as well.
Yeah. And so, in fact, let's take a couple of questions that people had related to that, right? Someone was asking about all these contracts, government contracts limited to U.S.-based companies, or do they also extend to friendly nations?
So it depends on the type of contract vehicle. SBIR, STTR is limited to U.S.-based companies, but there are definitely other contract vehicles out there that we can jump into.
Can they create a subsidiary? Can a foreign-owned company create a subsidiary in the U.S. Is that good enough to meet the SBIR requirement, or it takes more than that?
No, it has to be a U.S. owned company fully and right by U.S. citizens as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gets a little tricky if it becomes a subsidiary of an international company.
Right.
But those are things that we work with our lawyers to dive into with you and help those companies understand how to engage.
And when you say, does it have to be just majority owned by by a U.S. person, like 50%? What are we talking about in terms of the 51%? So even like if someone was to take an investment, right, from an investor that's not U.S. based, that could change that 50% there, right?
It can. And there's different rules around the majority owned by venture capital operating companies as well. So there are some waivers for those, but where that VC capital comes from and if they have an influential role in the company or ownership stake, that can change award criteria.
But that's for SBIRs. But what about other contracts? Is there avenues for foreign-owned companies to do work with the U.S.? And what obviously you mentioned friendly nations, Israel, India. That's not Five Eye, right? So is there a difference between Five Eye versus non-Five Eye?
Five Eyes companies from Five Eyes countries are definitely looked on a little bit more favorably than ones outside of the Five Eyes. But there are still definitely contract vehicles out there that allow for foreign-owned companies to compete in this space. It is harder, right? Because there's an additional validation and security clearances and those steps that those companies are going to have to go through. And often we find those companies partnering with US-based companies to broaden their scope in the US market and build that industrial base.
Yeah. So when an Israeli company, for example, in cyber, right, they're so good at cyber, right, needs to sell to the U.S. government. I've seen them sometimes create a subsidiary in the U.S., find a U.S. person to own it. Then it's kind of a service play, right? The U.S. company doesn't really own the IP of the product. The product is owned by the Israeli company. Is that still enough, I guess, to sell it because they don't own the IP? The IP is owned by a foreign, company. I mean, just like Microsoft has, subsidiaries all over the world. How do we deal with that kind of, on the developer side too, right? People working offshore, right? People are always worried, well, I'm US companies, but my development team is in India, So
Yep. Development teams need to be stateside for a lot of contracts, right? Because we want to make sure that the development that's happening is happening in the U.S. by U.S. citizens. And so for core development,
they have to be U.S. citizens or U.S. persons,
U.S. persons.
Yeah.
Yep. And, an Israeli company owning the IP, it's going to be dependent upon what that IP is, right? Where is that technology going, right? Is it going into a critical part of our nuclear infrastructure? Then the answer is probably going to be no. Is it going to go into a operating system that's going to be helping identify personnel, or is it going to be going into an operating system that's just communicating, open this door or open this door? Right? It'll be a risk-based decision based off of those different contracts. So I unfortunately don't have a clear-cut answer across the board there. That's what we specialize in diving into and working with the lawyers to understand.
So you would say those companies should reach out to you anyways, right? To at least try to get an understanding of their product, and based on the use case, your lawyers could end up telling them, well, you're wasting your time, or there's something there, right?
Yep. The majority of the work that we do at the Outpost is with US-based companies. I'd say 99% of that is where our focus is. The international space and working with international companies has been a market that we have not really actively touched because there's still a lot of work to be done with the US-based companies and helping those transition and scale. And so that's been our focus at the Outpost.
That makes sense. Yeah, no doubt. So Joseph was asking, how important is CMMC to winning contracts?
Well, I'd say CMMC doesn't exist yet because they reverted it, and the execution is going to be extraordinarily complex for any small business. And so I think that we have to rework those entire standards. I don't think CMMC is going to the way that it was rolled out, I don't think it's sustainable for small businesses, and it eats up you can't operate in the DoD space if you have to meet all these requirements prior to even entering as a small business.
Yeah,
I think
prior to winning a bid is a disgrace. That's what I had non-concurred for. There was many things, but that one alone is just mind-boggling. And they kind of tweaked it to say, well, you can't do it under, these different CMMC levels, right? I think it's under level 3, which is pretty basic CUI, so it just really makes no sense.
Yeah, and I think what you're going to have to start seeing is that the government will have to start providing basic set of tools and basic set of hey, here's how you set up your network, here's how you set up your infrastructure if you want to be working on government contracts, right? There's going to have to be a set standard that's openly available and accessible for companies to adopt if they want to work. And I think creating partnerships with sort of the large providers of these services, like how do you configure your mail, whether it's Gmail or Outlook or something else, right? We should be able to partner with those companies and set the standards at that organizational level instead of passing on that buck to small businesses.
No doubt. But doesn't mean we don't care about security too, right? So people still need to do better. And it's not an excuse, being a small business is not an excuse to completely ignore cyber, right? Compliance is one thing.
Yeah, everyone needs to have 2-factor authentication turned on, right? At the very least, we should start there.
Yeah, there's a stop there, right? Yeah. All right. So Christopher was asking here that, he has a small business. He has an idea that he needs help formulating and he's in cyber. What's the best approach to, for people that have dreams like this and, getting into the entrepreneurial side of the house? Can they use SBIRs? Is it too early? Like how big do you have to be to start thinking about, working SBIRs and stuff?
For the Air Force open topic process to be competitive around the dual use space, you need to have a product and show some sort of traction. So coming in with an idea for the open topic process you're not likely to be competitive. There are specific topics that are out there across the entire DoD space. Where coming in with those ideas and further doing that research is absolutely an opportunity for those folks.
Not for open topics.
Yeah, not for open topics. And then so, Chris,
that's another thing that people always say, right? They say, oh, there's no topic for me, but that's not a thing, right? There's an open topic where you have a product, because people look at all the topics, they can't find a fit, so they move on. But there's, right, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's an open topic, right?
You are 100% correct. The Air Force does an open topic call where they say any company can propose and tell us why you think this is applicable to the DoD. And this is something we help companies with a lot at the Outpost is, hey, this is the specific use case. This is the organization. This is who you need to be talking to if you want to work with the DoD and you want to work with the Air Force. Here are the people. And so you can really nail that in the application process. Specifically, the Air Force open topic asks for you to go down to that level.
And do you guys help outside of SBIRs? Like if someone wants to be, on contract vehicles and they're struggling with GSA and NASA soup and whatever other vehicle on the planet, what do they do?
I'd say a large part of our business is SBIR, but a majority is not. So we do a majority of our work in working with phase 3 contract vehicles, GSA, getting folks on schedule, getting folks on OT or CSOs. We help companies pursue a lot of these additional contract vehicles and opportunities. So it's the beauty of having an amazing team here. 20 folks. We have a large expertise in a wide variety of areas.
Yeah, no doubt you do. All right. So that was the last question. First, wanted to thank you for your time. It was great. I think people learned a lot. I learned a lot. Everybody learned a lot. A lot of great questions. But we'll always give the last words to you. But first, I'm going to remind people of who is going to be joining us next week. So next Tuesday, August 23rd, we have dear friend Kate Stewart, who is a VP of Dependable Embedded Systems at the Linux Foundation. And she's going to join us to talk about embedded systems and the cybersecurity. She was part of the founders of SPDX, the Software Bill of Material Linux Foundation format. She's going to tell us also how she brought real-time OS capabilities into Linux, which is pretty exciting, and kind of what are the differences and the struggle when it comes to managing embedded systems. So back to the chip discussion of everything as a chip nowadays. Well, all these devices, IoT devices, will be considered embedded systems, and often have very specific, limited, chips and memory and things. So that's a pretty interesting discussion on how to innovate, how to move at the pace of relevance with embedded systems. So that's next Tuesday. Wanted to remind also, I'm going to bring up back the slide for a second, because I want to remind everybody that Platform One is calling for this Platform One basic ordering agreement on ramp. Finally, I had I had asked that we do an on ramp every quarter, but I think that's been 2 years. But I don't know how long it's been, but it's been too long. So the good news is there is one now, so don't miss it. So if you're a company that brings DevSecOps digital transformation value, you should really take a look at that BOA and try to be part of this contract vehicle, which is really the largest DoD DevSecOps vehicle. And then, of course, to remind everybody that if you're interested in being an early adopter of Learn with Nick, we're capping the numbers to 1,000 for the launch. And we're very close to, I think we have like maybe 20 seats left. I don't know. I need to check the numbers. But the way to do that is to send us an email at info@preventbreach.com, so you can get access to the website and start learning. It's continuous learning, so it's not stuck in time, unlike the universities. We're going to do a new video every week. Another week we'll have a Q&A session, 2 hours. We have telcos, banks, healthcare companies, so it's not just DoD stuff. It's a lot of big Fortune 100 companies, but buying kind of hundreds of seats at a time for their teams. But it creates a pretty cool community of practice there. So yeah, that's going to launch at the end of the month. And now over to you for the last words.
Nick, thanks for taking the time to have me on here. It was a fun conversation. I really appreciated it. And to anyone that wants to work with the DoD or work with government, we're happy to help here at the Outpost. Contact information is below. Just reach out to us. Happy to talk to you about what it takes to work with the DoD. Helped a ton of companies succeed and want to keep doing that. And then to everyone listening and watching, right? This is the country and the community that we build each day. So thanks for being a part of that journey and building the American dream. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next Tuesday with Kate. And in the meantime, make sure you keep fighting the good fight and making sure our kids have a fighting chance at winning against China 20 years from now. Stay safe. We'll see you next week.